All right, looks like we're at time. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining us for the Around the Valuation World edition of the April 21st webcast. My name is Chandra and I'm with NAC the Consultants Training Institute. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. Um, First, to obtain CB credit, you must answer all the poll questions that pop up on your screen during today's webcast. If you have an ABW subscription, you'll see the CP certificates in your NACP.com portal within 7 to 10 business days. If you have any questions during today's webcast, feel free to use the Q&A feature, as those will be directed to the presenter. If you have any questions about NACP or any technical questions, feel free to use the chat feature, as those will be directed over to me. And then, the next slide. With Around the Valuation World and the Around the Valuation International, we try to cover all the upcoming or the hot topics in the industry. Within the 2-hour window, we can't cover all the items that come up. So there are links to other resources that are available to you that you can click on and remain updated on hot topics in the industry. And then with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Alina, who will get us started with today's webcast.
Thank you, Shanda, and welcome everyone to our show. I'm glad that you are all here with us, especially right after our tax season. So I hope everyone survived that. And today we have Mike Gregory. He's always with us doing industry headlines, so that's very important for everyone. And we have Janae Castell with Enrique Brito. They are going to be talking about technology's role in transforming M&A. You know that's we are having a lot of M&A right now. And after that, we have Michael Kaplan. He's going to be talking with our judges about dwelling experts. After that, we have Janae again. She is interviewing Craig Everett. They are going to be talking about the Pepperdine cost of capital study. And Michael Mulder, we'll be talking about the case law studies. So he's going to be talking about US versus Holmes. And at the end, we are going to have Mike again with Karen, and they are going to be talking about the importance of the Engagement Foundation and learning from our mistakes. So now I'm going to have Mike Gregory. Mike, welcome. He is with us every month. And I think that is important. He's an expert on IRS, business valuations, but also he's a great presenter. It's like having a teacher with you all the time. So make sure that if you go to a conference or need something, just talk to him because he's amazing. And Mike, you can take it from here. It's
Well,
great
thank you,
having you
Elena.
today.
Thank you, Elena. You are too kind, but my pleasure to be here today. Well, we have 6 different articles we're going to talk about. And the first one, right on point, we're going to have the expert with us a little later in the session, insights into the latest Pepperdine study and how to use it. And I've got an article here that goes into some detail on that with how you can use the Pepperdine study. But we're going to have the expert with us a little later today. Lost profits or lost business value. When do you do lost profits and when do you do lost business value? And there's an article that discusses the details associated with that. Tips for writing expert reports for court proceedings. This is talking about expert witnesses and what we need to do as an expert witness. Misconceptions over USPAP, reporting for litigation. That'll tie into the Circular 230 that we've talked about here in previous months, was open for comments from the public, but also USPAP was something that the IRS was saying maybe using that as a standard going forward. We'll see where that goes with Circular 230. FactSet Review 2025 pre-order is available. So if you're looking for FactSet Review, just notifying you it's available now. And then how is AI currently being used in BV firms? And this is actually from Australia, but there's some insights from within this court case that can be helpful to all of us and just on how that court is looking at this and how this might be something you want to look at with your reports. So how to apply the Pepperdine study, recognize when to use lost profits versus lost business, applying writing expert report tips, consider what USPAP Standard 10 really states, acquire FactSet 2025, and recognize how others are using artificial intelligence in business valuation firms. So the first item in here is with the Pepperdine study. And Dr. Craig Everett, who's going to be with us, he shares insights in this article. And BV Resources comments that about 35% of the folks surveyed said they used the Pepperdine studies. So who uses it? And in this article, it talks about venture capitalists, pretty much in the West, the Midwest, and New England. For private equity firms, they look at it to acquire, improve, and sell. And then for appraisers looking at discounted cash flow, said they look at the capitalization rate of earnings, and most common is to use EBITDA. And they said the median risk-free rate is about 4.1%. Risk premium comes in about 6.2%. And then the ISRP for manufacturing is about 2.7, and for service entities, it's about 2.9. Long-term growth rate was 3.2. And they broke out with some other things in this article and said for the much larger firms, so if you're greater than 500 million, about 90% use the public companies. But for those who are valuing businesses that are less than 25 million, about half of them use public companies, but it drops off very quickly as you get to smaller entities. And then they provide quartile reports on private equity, debt, and liquidity. And their caution is this is data that's being solicited, it's information obtained. It's not something that you can say this is definitely what it is, but it's good information to talk to you about what might be reasonable with what you're doing. And a lot of people use Pepperdine as a check on what they're doing. Lost profits versus lost business value. And this is a way 30,000 foot overview. It says as the business continues to operate after an alleged wrongful act, use lost profits. But if the business went out of business or the business had to sell, then you want to appraise it the day before, looking at the business value on that day. Now, that's the big picture in a nutshell, but there's a whole article talking about a lot of nuances here. And then there's a brief review of the financial literature on this. So there's a nice commentary to get further detail on this if you want to know more about lost profit versus lost business value. Tips for writing expert reports for court proceedings. Now, this case I'm commenting, it's from Australia. But I read the case, and the logic on the case is, I thought, very much on point. If you're generating artificial intelligence, it must not be used to draft or prepare expert reports. That's the comment from Australia. In the US, when it has been used, it's been found that you can't duplicate it. So if you can't duplicate exactly what it was because AI is changing, that causes consternation in our US courts. So I'm commenting, this is another court, another country, but note what they're saying. Parties may seek leave of the court to rely on generating AI to assess analyzing data when preparing the expert report. So analyzing data, not an issue. The author also has been asked, when you write a report, comment on what you are doing. So I, first person, what you're doing versus what may be something that's from another source. Misperceptions over USPAP reporting. Well, Jay Fishman is now with Stout. He used to have his own firm. And he's commenting, he's an accredited senior appraiser with the American Society of Appraisers, so he has to meet USPAP. But he's been on the Appraisal Foundation board, and he's a very well-known appraiser, and he's an emeritus with the American Society of Appraisers. And he's saying, out came these articles on potential changes to Circular 230. And the IRS is proposing the standard that would be used would be USPAP. And a lot of folks are very concerned about USPAP. And NACFA has a nice comparison chart with USPAP and what's involved with the AICPA and what's involved with NACFA. But he said there's a lot of misconceptions about USPAP. USPAP does not require a lengthy report. It requires a report that has everything in it that you've done so it can stand on its own, but it doesn't require a lengthy report. He suggests you actually read Standard 10 of what's needed for a business valuation report. And the key is it should be replicated. So having worked for the IRS does not accept a redacted or a restricted report. It does not accept a summary report. It only accepts a full report. And it's because the IRS wants to know all the different assumptions and what sources you used on whatever it is you use to complete your analysis. And he's basically saying with USPAP, that's just saying you need to be able to replicate, some other person can replicate everything you've done in your report. So it doesn't have to be lengthy, but it needs to be complete. And then Fact Set Review 2025 pre-orders available. So it used to be Merger Stat, and it became Fact Set Merger Stat Review, and now it's simply Fact Set Review. And the 2025 edition is now out. It's available this month. It'll be available in print version next month, but you can order it now. This has industry pricing, premiums, multiples, different payments that involve U.S. companies, involving privately held, publicly traded, and cross-border transactions. And when you buy the subscription, it includes a monthly update of what's taking place with different trends and what's taking place with detail by different industries. So letting you know it's out there in electronic form now and print form coming out next month. How AI is currently being used in BV firms. So this is an article from BV Review, And this is a survey of 74 folks who attended one of their webinars that had to do with AI. And the research came back and said, well, actually, about 22% use AI for industry research. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's a good source. It provides you with different information, but you need to verify what you receive. 12% use it to summarize documents. So if you're looking at a number of different documents, you might ask an AI like ChatGPT or another source, I'm putting in these different documents. Excuse me, here's what they say. Can you summarize those for me? And that may be helpful. Client communications and marketing. For brainstorming and idea generation, I think that's a great idea for AI because it's going to help you expand on things beyond what your own thinking might be. For data analyses and for drafting a valuation report, about 5% use that. That's a major caution to make sure any sources that show up, that you check those. Reviewing calculations. So just to see if what you think you have done correctly is actually what's in there. That can be a source. You want to make sure that someone is checking that on your end too for what you think is in a given cell is actually in the cell as you had anticipated. And about 24% don't use AI at all. So the reciprocal on that is about 76% are using AI for something right now. And that's from, this is again, it's a poll. It's a small sample, but it kind of gives you an idea what's happening in our industry right now. In terms of sources, here's how you can get the Pepperdine Private Capital Markets Report. Here were proposed changes to IRS Circular 230 that came out from BV Resources. The IRS now has that, but the IRS, having received this information, they had an anticipation of how quickly they would be using this, and they had an anticipation of how fast this would come out to the public. Well, they've lost about 13,000 employees since January 20th, and by May 14th, they will have lost 19,000 employees of 90,000. At least that's the projection from Dodge. From DOGE with Elon Musk is the IRS will be losing another 7,500 here by May 14th. So I'm just suggesting the people who were working on this and were planning to respond on it may not be there, or very few may be there. So what will ever happen with this remains to be seen. It may have gone into a big black hole. We'll find out. Jay Fishman, here's the full article on the BV update talking about the issue of USPAP and what's needed there. Here's the 2025 edition for the fact sheet review, formerly fact set merger stat review and formerly merger stat. You can obtain that. And then here's this case from Australia that I cited on with how they looked at AI, and I thought the logic on it was very good. That's why I pulled this case. Just look at what they looked at and why they thought what could or could not be used in evaluation. In each month, these are the different sources that I consider. In this month, we used BV Wire, BV Update, Forensic Expert Witness, some information from the IRS, and Quick Read. And then each month, I'm more than happy to help. This is my contact information for both phone and email. And if I can help you with anything or you have any questions, feel free to come back to me. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I have passing this back to Elena Rivera. Back to you, Elena.
Well, you got me instead.
Oh, back to Mel. Okay. Back to Mel instead of Elena. Take it away, Mel.
Got it. Thanks, Mike. Always wonderful information. The first polling question is now up. So you want to make sure that you answer all the polling questions if you want to get CPE. We're going to go to our next segment where Janae Castell is going to be spending some time talking to Enrique Brito about technology's role in middle market M&A and some of the elements there. So I'll let you introduce Enrique, Janae, and thank you for being here. And let's take it away.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, I've got Enrique with me. And Enrique, let's just jump right in. We've got your bio right here, but we've got some really cool things that I want to jump into in our interview. So would you mind giving us a background on, or give us a bit about your background and how you decided to focus on the intersection of technology and middle market M&A?
Yeah, sure. And good afternoon to everybody attending the session. I've been in investment banking for a little over 25 years. And in that time, I had a chance to both lead and support dozens of M&A transactions. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, So, and mainly in the middle market, I mean, involving private businesses in the middle market. So over time, it became clear that technology was just more than a supporting function, but a value driver in terms of efficiency and cost savings, especially in deal making. So with this in mind, I started focusing on how new technologies could be used to improve the way we work with clients and navigate the complexity of M&A. So what is driving and has been driving technology adoption in mergers and acquisitions is mainly the need for efficiency and cost reduction in a very competitive deal environment. So we have seen that as a result of that, the investment in digital transformation has increased tremendously, as well as the increasing use of AI to enhance due diligence and decision making, especially in the middle market. Well, all this technology is mainly addressing four main pain points in M&A. The one being, of course, overpaying for targets, which is mainly a function of overestimating synergies. And we can talk about how technology can be used to fine-tune plans and forecasts in companies, including Monte Carlo simulation and other statistical analysis techniques, to fine-tune how we see the future playing out once we know what the company is all about. But in addition to that, another main point in M&A is due diligence, both in terms of the length it takes, because it usually takes between 3 and 6 months, depending on the complexity of the deal, to do the research on the buyer side to make sure that they know what they are acquiring. But also the cost of that process is usually between 1% and 3% of the deal value. So it's a significant deployment of both time, people, and money to make the deal happen. So technology is a very big driver of cost savings in these areas. And then, of course, is post-merger integration that happens just as the deal closes. The gold standard is 120 days. So we have just 4 months to integrate the acquisition into the main company. And that requires very fine-tuned processes in terms of project management and what have you. So all this is basically saying that my experience, both at the McLean Group first as an investment bank in Virginia, as well as PB Maris Capital Markets, and now at Kaizen Consulting, has given me a front row seat to see how these technologies can be incorporated into a difficult process and help us client value.
Okay. Well, your presentation covered the middle market M&A and these things that you're seeing in M&A as an investment banker. We have a bit of a surprise for our attendees. And in light of the discussions about and the relevance of AI and machine learning, you and I discussed this, and this was your idea, which is a lot of fun. It was very interesting, and it makes me a little bit nervous because I've got a whole lot of things right now to try and tie this all together. But we thought it'd be fun to play some clips of an AI created overview of Enrique's presentation in Vegas. And what you are about to hear is 2 chatbots that are interacting with each other and discussing what Enrique covered. So I'm going to play some clips. The entire interview was over 25 minutes, so we're just going to play a piece of what that overview the AI created was.
Imagine like cutting due diligence time like by a crazy amount, like 70%.
Yeah, and that's not some like futuristic fantasy. That's really happening right now with technology transforming middle market M&A.
And you know what? This isn't just some Wall Street thing, right? This affects like everyone, even if we're not like, in those fancy suits. the billion-dollar deals.
Absolutely. We're going to take a deep dive today into a presentation from the NACVA Super Conference. It's a goldmine of information about how tech is changing the game of M&A.
So we're talking AI, data analytics, VR. It's like we're stepping into a sci-fi movie, but it's actually happening.
It is, and we're going to break it all down for you, the trends, the real world examples, what it means for anyone in business, really.
And get this, we've got some surprising stats coming up, like how cybersecurity is now a make or break factor in any deal.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the middle market kind of represents a sweet spot, in the M&A world. It makes up about 60% of the deal volume.
So there's a lot of action happening there.
Okay, so that's our intro, and I'll tell you, the people in my household had a very hard time telling that those were not humans discussing what Enrique presented. Now, there's some interesting quirks, and there's pronunciation issues, but it's very difficult to tell. So it's fascinating. There's another clip that is a really good overview, and this next several minutes is going to discuss spreadsheet analysis, virtual data rooms, and data analytics. Anything that you want to add before we start this next clip, Enrique?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating to see how we can now leverage technology to gain insights into somebody else's work. So I thought, well, why don't we take an AI tool, ask it to look at my presentation in Vegas and come up with an audio summary of what I did. And that's what Janae is presenting now. So yeah, play the next clip.
Okay.
Okay, you've got my attention. What about financial analysis? Can AI handle the number crunching too?
Oh, absolutely. AI is totally transforming financial analysis. Those massive spreadsheets with all the financial data?
Just thinking about them gives me a headache.
Well, AI algorithms can analyze those spreadsheets, spot any anomalies, even assess the accuracy of financial forecasts with amazing precision.
So it's like a financial detective, like sniffing out any inconsistencies or potential red flags.
That's a great way to put it. And what's even more impressive is that it can integrate with existing accounting systems, providing a really comprehensive view of a company's financial health.
It sounds like AI is like taking over the heavy lifting, and that frees up human analysts to focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another game changer, virtual data rooms, or VDR.
VDRs. Remember the days of those physical data rooms, like stacked with files, floor to ceiling? I'm getting flashbacks to paper cuts just thinking about it.
Yeah, thankfully those days are fading fast. We're seeing a huge shift towards VDRs with a whopping 64% of deal makers now using these secure online platforms.
So no more like flying across the country just to sit in a stuffy room filled with paper. I'm already liking where this is going.
Exactly. And while some deal makers still prefer, face-to-face meetings for some of those sensitive discussions, VDRs offer a level of security, accessibility, and collaboration that you just can't match with those physical data rooms.
Okay, let's break it down. What makes VDR so secure? Are we talking like Fort Knox levels of protection for our sensitive data?
You're on the right track. Leading VDR platforms like Intralinks, DataSite, Firmex, they're designed with security as a top priority.
So it's not just about keeping documents in a digital vault.
Right.
There's more to it.
Right. We're talking about multi-factor authentication, making sure only authorized users can access the data.
So it's like having multiple layers of security, making it almost impossible for unauthorized access.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just access control. We're also talking document level permissions.
Meaning you can control who can view, edit, or download specific documents.
Precisely. And to top it all off, there are detailed audit trails that track every action taken within the VDR.
So if something goes wrong, you can trace it back and see exactly what happened.
Exactly. It's about transparency and accountability, which are, absolutely crucial when dealing with sensitive M&A data.
Okay, VDRs are secure, but what about collaboration? Can multiple parties work on documents at the same time?
Absolutely. Collaboration is a key feature of VDRs. They have these built-in communication tools that allow for real-time document editing, Q&A forums, even video conferencing.
So it's like having everyone in the same room, even if they're spread across the globe.
Precisely. VDRs are breaking down geographical barriers, making collaboration seamless, which is, essential in the fast-paced world of M&A.
This is all incredibly impressive, but with all this talk about AI and VDRs, I'm curious, is good old-fashioned data analysis still relevant in M&A?
More relevant than ever, data analytics is absolutely crucial for identifying potential targets, evaluating their worth, and ultimately making smart investment decisions.
So it's not just about crunching numbers. There's a real art to data analysis in M&A.
You got it. And we're not just talking about those basic spreadsheets and financial ratios anymore. Data science has taken center stage, allowing us to extract valuable insights from huge data sets.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through how data analytics is being used in target evaluation.
Think of it as a multi-layered approach. So first we have descriptive analytics, which helps us uncover trends in a company's financial performance, operational efficiency, and their market position.
So it's like painting a detailed picture of the target company's current state.
Exactly, but we don't stop there. Then there's diagnostic analytics, which digs deeper into the root causes of those trends.
So if sales are down, diagnostic analytics helps us figure out if it's because of like increased competition, a flawed product, or something else entirely.
Precisely. It's like being a financial detective, uncovering the underlying story behind those numbers.
This is fascinating. What about predicting the future? Can data analytics help us with that?
That's where predictive analytics comes in. By using historical data and machine learning algorithms, we can forecast a company's financial performance and potential market opportunities.
So it's like having a crystal ball for business.
Well, it's not about seeing the future with certainty, but it's about making informed predictions based on data-driven insights.
So there's another clip discussing virtual reality and collaboration remotely. And I can just run straight into that, Enrique, unless.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Now, what about the metaverse? I've heard whispers about virtual data rooms and immersive due diligence experiences.
It's not just hype. The metaverse is blurring those lines between the physical and digital worlds, creating some really, really exciting possibilities for M&A.
Can you paint a picture of what this might look like?
Sure. Imagine putting on a VR headset and stepping into a virtual replica of a factory you're considering acquiring. You could walk through the facility, inspect equipment, and even interact with real-time data overlaid onto the physical space.
That's incredible. So no more expensive and time-consuming site visits.
Well, not necessarily, but it certainly expands the possibilities for due diligence. The metaverse could also transform post-merger integration. Imagine collaborating with remote teams in a shared virtual space,
Right.
visualizing data, brainstorming solutions, and even simulating different integration scenarios.
Okay. So before we wrap up and give you, so there was an introduction, it did a whole summary to introduce the topic, and it went through each of the things that Enrique discussed, and then it has the final thoughts as well. So there's a structure to this AI summary that it created based on what it was given in Enrique's presentation.
But with all this talk about advanced technology, it's natural to wonder about the role of humans in the future of M&A. I mean, are we becoming obsolete?
Not at all. Technology can automate tasks, provide insights, and enhance efficiency, but it can't replicate human judgment, human creativity, and empathy.
So it's not about humans versus machines, but humans and machines working together.
Precisely. The most successful deal makers in the future will be those who can master both the art and the science of M&A,
Yeah.
leveraging technology's power while retaining that essential human element.
That makes sense. What specific skills will be most valuable in this new era of M&A?
Well, critical thinking will be paramount. The ability to sift through vast amounts of data, identify patterns, and make those sound judgments. It'll be more important than ever.
So it's not just about crunching numbers, but understanding what those numbers mean in a broader context.
Exactly. And then there's creativity, the ability to think outside the box, come up with those innovative solutions and adapt to unexpected challenges.
That's something AI can't replicate, at least not yet.
Right. And of course emotional intelligence remains crucial, building relationships, understanding motivations, navigating those complex negotiations. Those are all human skills that will remain essential in the future of M&A.
It sounds like the ideal M&A professional of the future will be a blend of analytical prowess, creative thinking, and interpersonal skills.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about adaptability and a growth mindset, the ability to embrace lifelong learning, to stay ahead of those technological advancements, and to constantly evolve your skill set will be key to thriving in this dynamic landscape.
So it's not enough to be an expert today. You have to be a perpetual student, always learning and growing.
Precisely. The world of M&A is in constant flux, and those who are willing to embrace change will be the ones who succeed.
Okay, so
Okay. So, Enrique, final thoughts and comments on our video.
Well, so that in case you're wondering, the tool that I used is called Notebook LM. That's a Google product. And all I did, I fed the application my talking points at the conference along with my slides, and it ran with it. What you heard is AI putting together a podcast based on the information that I provided. So the two critical takeaways from this is that, as you see, technology is more than a support function. It's a value driver, and it can be used to enhance revenues, reduce cost, and minimize risk. And there are specific tools that fit in each one of the three categories. But more importantly, as you see, this technology doesn't replace expertise. It frees up the time for us to now come up with the insights. In other words, AI is great in generating dots, but it still needs expertise to connect the dots. And that's when we come in with insights, by having the free time that technology allowed to help us in moving forward.
I will say, when we were creating this and we were looking at the clips to use, I did actually take a stab at having ChatGPT create the clips, and it did an okay job, but ChatGPT didn't really understand the phrasing, and so I just had to give it a time, right? And I'm kind of stabbing in the dark about, cut off at this time or that time, and it wasn't nearly as good as, I've used Audacity. I used to create ringtones on my phone, right? So I've used Audacity before. So I went in and I downloaded Audacity again, haven't used it in forever, got, refamiliarized with Audacity to create the clips. And as a human, I can go in and I can see the visualization of the sound and create those clips better and probably quicker than AI could do that now. But I did think it was also interesting just having that visualization as kind of having something else create. Audacity took audio and put it in a different format that I could see and use. So I just thought it was interesting. I was considering a lot of different things as we were putting these things together. And there was a fair amount of split in my household about whether or not this was really, really cool or really, really creepy.
And now Gemini has come up with a similar product.
Yeah.
That does the other summer.
Yeah. So you discussed a lot of this for, this was an M&A presentation, but clearly there's a lot of overlap and a lot that we can draw on for business valuation. I think, given how you've selected some of this to kind of take the presentation that way for our attendees today, I think that should be obvious. But is there anything else that you want to take a minute on and elaborate between the similarities and valuation, due diligence, target analysis, company analysis, anything like that?
Well, that was one of the main motivations for my presentation in Vegas. although the presentation was focusing on how technology is transforming M&A, this is equally applicable to the world of business valuation. In the sense that in both investment banking and business valuation, we need to develop a very thorough understanding of our client business and industries, in the industries in which these companies operate. So we need to use data analytics to make sense of the company historical performance and future performance so we can assess their value with more accuracy. We also need to use LLMs, large language models, to review contracts, to extract data, to uncover discrepancies in documents, as well as to make sure that there are no compliance issues regarding the companies that we're valuing, as well as the companies that we're looking to sell. So that's the first area of similarities, a very deep understanding of our client business. The second one is being able to manage an engagement process. Both in business valuation as well as M&A, we need to manage that process. So we need to use technology in the sense of project management, data acquisition and warehousing, document sharing and collaboration. These are all common to both business valuation and M&A. We also need to use analytic capabilities to understand historical performance and to make sure that the company is well positioned to execute in its forecast, because both in business valuation as well as in M&A, we're selling the future. In business valuation, you're valuing the company's future performance. In M&A, we're selling a story about the future performance of the company, all based on what the company has done up until today. So that's the second area of similarities. And finally, both M&A as well as business valuation has a process of lead generation and lead conversion, I mean, their own clients. And this is where CRM and other similar technologies come in to do client segmentation and relationship building. So those three areas, understanding our clients, managing a process, and being able to generate leads and convert those leads into clients, are very common to business valuation and M&A. So the impact that technology is having on financial advisory services is very significant and real. So the advantage will go to those that are leveraging technology to, number one, streamline their own processes. Second, to assess value more accurately. And finally, to be able to use technology to mitigate risk, both as related to the engagement and related to understanding your own client. So I hope that this was helpful. There is a whole more content, both in the recording of my presentation in Vegas, as well as Janae, will you be able to make the entire audio summary available for the participants?
Yeah, I talked with Chinda, and I think he was going to see if he was able to drop that in, but I think I'm trying to put it in the chat, so we'll see if it goes through in the chat, the full interview.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for having me, and I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I appreciate it so much, Enrique. Thank you for taking the time to come and share those things, because this is happening. So even if you don't like it, you need to be aware of it, and if you can use it to help you out, use them as tools as much as you're comfortable with.
Thank you to both of you for being with us today. And AI keeps getting interesting and interesting. If you are interested in some presentation of AI, I'm gonna put a link. There's one free coming up on April 30th, and I think it's gonna be very interesting. But for now, I'm gonna let Chanda take it from here and talk about the conference. Chanda.
Hey, thank you, Alina. I just want to jump in real quick and just a quick announcement that our annual conference has been posted. It is going to be in September of this year in Salt Lake City, Utah. There is information in your materials in regards to registration. So if you are interested in joining us and you register before April 30th, there is a promotion of $450 off for early registration right now that's available to you. Right? And then, yeah, that's it. So I'll turn back to Alina.
Thank you, Shanda. So everyone, I hope to see you there at that conference. So make sure you put the time on your calendar. I know it's a different time of the year that as we have done previously, but it will be great seeing you in Salt Lake City next year. And now we are going to our next session where we have our judges, Michael Kaplan, that I discovered today that it's never Mike, it's always Michael. So we have them, and we are gonna be talking about dwelling expert to credible expert to divergent opinions and what should a judge do. So it's great to have the judges here. And Michael, you can start with this session now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alina. And I want to thank our two judges for joining us today. We have Judge Christopher Yates, an appellate court judge from the state of Michigan, who is with us today. We have Judge Timothy Driscoll from Nassau County, New York, a trial court judge. These guys are great. I want to let you know that I've worked with them on a variety of education programs over many, many years. Judge Yates and I used to work together at the National Judicial College in the complex commercial cases curriculum. Judge Yates, Judge Driscoll, and also Judge Platt, and a whole team from the NACVA worked together on an educational program that we present for the American College of Business Court Judges. And anyway, we are blessed today to have them here dealing with this very important topic. Now, I've listened to Mike Gregory. We've all listened to Mike Gregory this morning talk about updates, things that are happening in the industry, new publications, new up-to-date data to work with. We have heard Janae Castell interview Enrique Brito in a brilliant presentation of AI and some of the ways that AI can assist us and ways that it may be particularly challenging. So I want to give you a setting, a situation that is a real situation that our judges, if they haven't faced yet using AI, and the situation applies to AI and even pre-using AI, but it's something that's been part of the program, part of the experience for many, many years. We have two experts walk into the courtroom. One of them was appointed by the plaintiff in the lawsuit. One of them was appointed by the defendant. These are very, very qualified, very capable experts. These are experts who are very active in the industry, active in NACFA, active in the ASA, the AICPA, the Appraisal Institute, active in international organizations. These are people who've been around a long time. They have taken so many courses. They've done many valuations. They've been involved in research, and they are usual suspects, as they're often referred to. And they come into the courtroom, and again, these are people who the courtroom is not an unfamiliar setting for them. Each one of them has decades of experience, has many, 10, 20, 30, 40 trials under their belts. And the plaintiff's expert takes the stand and gives testimony and opines that the business's evaluation of $28 million. The defendant's expert takes the stand and opines that the business has a valuation of $9 million. And these experts may or may not have used AI, but I don't think it's going to change the question. It may change the judge's approach to answering the question. Both of these guys are credible. My question is, what do you do? I mean, should the judge pick up the phone and call Janae or Alina or Mel or Mike? That's a way to get to the bottom of it. Or should the judge appoint a special master? I remember the program that Judge Lero put on at one of our conferences on hot tubbing. Do the judges bring the experts together for a hot tubbing session? What is the typical situation? What is the approach that a judge can take or a judge should take under circumstances like this? So Judge Yates or Judge Driscoll, jump in.
It's such a great question. And I guess we're either fortunate or unfortunate that I don't think it ever happens. I don't think it's ever happened where we've had just such, wonderful experts in each side that we are torn like that. That said, it does happen, I suppose, sometimes on the margins. Let's talk about what a judge can't do. A judge can't call up Janae. A judge can't call up Michael Kaplan. A judge can't call up Mike Gregory. A judge can't call up anybody. This is not like that game show. You can't find a friend. That said, I'll use the friend metaphor I think it's a James Taylor song. You've got a friend. And what do I mean by that? Well, thanks to all of you educating Judge Yates, myself, Judge Platt, I think we have a lot more tools in our tool belt than even the ones we had when we first came into this business. So I don't think first of all, we can't call anybody outside the judicial system. We can rely on our fellow judges. We do take a lot of comfort from the conferences that we go to. The American College of Business Court Judges, of which Judge Yates is the current president, is meeting in 2 weeks in Michigan, and I'll take away a lot of things that I didn't know beforehand. But it is a very lonely job being a trial judge. Judge Yates is fortunate now, and he has a little bit of a trial docket, but he actually has friends who are judges who he can talk to on a regular basis, and indeed can't decide cases without them. It's a challenge, but we are equipped to do it. We are equipped to do it because of the adversary system. The adversary system works. It's how every case is decided. It's how every issue in every case is decided. So whether it's business valuation or whether it's who done it in a murder case, the adversary system still works. So I suppose I'll come back to the beginning, and that is that I trust the adversary system and I trust my own instincts, and I'm grateful that my own instincts are honed by working with all of you over so many years, and also honed by working with my sister and brother judges.
I agree with everything Judge Driscoll said. I'll add to that in my decade as a business court judge at the trial level, I never had a situation where I couldn't figure out which of the two competing opinions I found more persuasive. Judge Driscoll's correct that it's pretty rare to have such distinguished experts on each side who are cogent and persuasive and frankly, very difficult to reject. I will say this, though. We have authority under the rules of evidence to select a court-appointed expert to try to sort things out for us. I don't like to do that because I'm pretty comfortable with valuation issues. And so I feel it's ultimately my responsibility. So I might as well take it on from start to finish. We also have the benefit in business court of most attorneys choosing bench trials instead of jury trials. And so we're allowed to ask as many questions as we like. And I have a feeling Judge Driscoll's just like me. If I don't understand something, I'm going to pipe up and ask lots of questions. The real challenge for you as experts is in jury trials where we trial judges try to be as quiet as we can be. And so you never really get a sense of whether the jury's understanding what you're saying to them. In a bench trial with an active trial judge, then you have a really good sense of where the judge may be missing something. And believe me, we readily accept the possibility that we may be missing something. But at the end of the day, I will say that the expert testimony we get in valuation trials is generally very helpful. And so when I've written opinions, I've always felt pretty confident that what I was saying was correct start to finish. There are some areas where we're just not getting enough help at all. And as Judge Driscoll says, we may seek out our colleagues when that happens. So, for example, even now as a judge on the Court of Appeals, I will routinely invite to breakfast my dear friend, the most distinguished probate court judge in the state if I have a probate matter, because I'm I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. And when I don't know everything, I really want to try to figure it out. But honestly, in a bench trial, that's where you all come in. And I'm pleased to report that generally we get good, solid answers to the questions we ask from the bench.
And I would echo what Judge Yates just said about appointing a third expert, right? So as Michael posed the hypothetical, we've got Mike Gregory on one side, and we've got Janae Castell on the other side. Oh my gosh, the two of them are both so brilliant and so talented and so experienced. It would be, it's almost like an insult to the two of them if I have a third expert as great as Alina Rivera or Mike or Chris Mercer might be, or anyone like that. So why do I need a third cook to stir the broth? So I'm reticent to do that. I'm also reticent to spend any more money or to help the parties spend any more money. Litigation is expensive. You guys are expensive. You may be underpaid, but you're still expensive, right? So as a result, I'm very reticent to suggest that another expert should come in.
Right. I agree with Judge Driscoll completely on that point. It does add another layer of cost that you don't want to have to bear unless you think it's essential. If you have a terrific expert, you'll never think it's essential. So I tend not to exercise that option. Frankly, I think that it's kind of a cop-out to do that, because what you're doing is you're offloading the obligation to fully understand the subject matter to somebody else, and then have that somebody else spoon feed it to you.
I have a question. You mentioned that you're offloading the process, the job, the duty of making the determination as the business valuations onto another expert, rather than making that decision yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Each of you are well educated in the area of business valuation and the area of business matters. Many judges are not. And I would imagine that there are more judges who don't have anywhere near the education that each of you has and experience that each of you has in the business world. What would you do if a younger judge came to you and said, listen, I'm just coming onto the bench. I'm new to this. I know there are business cases. What bit of advice do you have as to how I can get all through this when I'm sitting there and I'm presented with two valuation experts or two other business types of experts who are speaking about things that I don't have background in? How do I sort it out?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, if it was this week or next week, is I'd say, come join us in Traverse City, Michigan, with my dear friend Judge Yates hosting the American College of Business Court Judges meeting. But let's just say it's, June or July. How would you sort it out? Well, you'd sort it out in the same way the adversary system allows everything to be sorted out. So I guess the Timmy's tips, if I could give to any of our audience today about how to make sure that there's not a tie, how to make sure that your side is the one that's winning. And we've said this throughout. Tell a story that is both interesting and that gets the judge interested. As Judge Yates said, when the judge asks questions are good. Use that opportunity to be the teacher that you are. And in being that teacher, recognize that trials, even bench trials, are still stories around the campfire. And so, although you want to take your work seriously and understand the essence of what you're doing, don't take yourself too seriously on the witness stand, because it still is human drama at stake. And I'll just give an example. When I was trying a case, and the expert for one of the parties had on his resume that he was a Six Sigma expert, a Six Sigma black belt. And I said, should I be sitting a little further away from you? That's black belt. That sounds a little scary. And of course, I knew what it was. And he said, oh, Your Honor, of course, that's just an evaluation metric for business principles that I know. And I know what it is. I know what it is. I just wanted to see how much of a human you are as you're going through these concepts. So don't be afraid to be a human being. We are stories around the campfire, which means we're trying to relate this to that, and we're trying to do it in a way that is believable, and that we as, or you as witnesses, are believable and credible also. So you're still human beings in that process.
And I'll add one thought about the challenge that you face, particularly in states that don't have dedicated business courts. As you might imagine, people like Judge Driscoll and I don't commonly wind up on the trial bench. It just doesn't happen that way, because most of the people who do the sorts of things that we do and have the skill sets we have are paid too much to leave practice to go be judges. You're much more apt to see somebody who's just been practicing in the local courts for a long time, maybe as a prosecutor, maybe as a public defender, maybe as a generalist. And those are the people who you often will find yourself in front of. And that's a real challenge for you. Richard Feynman, the Nobel laureate in physics, said that the essence of genius is taking complex concepts and making them readily understandable for everyone. And I would suggest that that's your challenge as well, because it may very well be you'll find yourself testifying in a bench trial where the judge really has no understanding of the concepts you are using as the building blocks for the opinion you're formulating. And when you do that, you have to be on the lookout for signs of confusion, whether it be among the jurors or from the bench. And then you have to be able to dumb it down, make it simpler, make it understandable, because at the end of the day, you can provide absolutely bulletproof expert testimony, but if the trier of fact doesn't understand it, there's a good chance you'll lose. And so I'm sorry to say that, but I've seen attorneys really struggle with that dilemma, and I'm sure that you as experts do as well.
So how do you get to be a good storyteller? You practice telling stories, which means that, you know, if you're fortunate enough to have teenage children, as Judge Yates and I do, you know, practice talking to them. They'll let you know if you're boring. They'll let you know if you're not interesting very, very quickly. Now, they may not have the analytical mind that you hope the judge has, but the idea of being able to capture the audience's attention when you're testifying is so important. So practice being a good storyteller.
I want to add something to what Judge Driscoll said and what Judge Yates said, and that is there are courses in storytelling. We have a storytelling workshop at the NACVA. I actually took a master class online from LeVar Burton on storytelling. And I've been involved in other programs in storytelling. And one of the things that I've learned is that's your connection. That's your connection to your audience, no matter how well educated or how uneducated your audience is. So when Judge Driscoll and Judge Yates talk about storytelling around the campfire, that's what grabs the attention of the jury. I believe that the judges, my experience has been the judges have been in a better situation. They're better positioned to capture something that the jurors may not, and tune in on something, some flaw that may have been camouflaged. But it boils down, so much of it boils down to the world of storytelling. I'm going to bounce out one more question to each of our judges because we're getting close to our time cutoff. Are there any other words of wisdom or suggestions that you have to our group today that will help them when they run into these situations in the courtroom?
The tendency when you're under stress, which a courtroom environment is stressful, is to speak quickly. Fight that with every fiber of your being and speak slowly. This stuff is hard. And even for Judge Yates and me, who quite frankly love this and breathe it, it still is hard. So to be able to not only to tell a story, but take your time while you're doing it is so absolutely essential.
Right. And be patient. It sometimes is difficult when you're the smartest person in the courtroom because you don't want to come off as the smartest person in the courtroom. But sometimes you have to go over something 2 or 3 times to get it to sink in with me. And if that's the case, you can only imagine how much you have to work at it with juries. But read your audience. I think it's fair to say that Judge Driscoll and I are both very clear on the bench whether we're understanding something or not. And even though jurors can't ask questions as we can, you can certainly read them and get a good sense of whether they're understanding.
Don't lose your cool on cross-examination also. Yep. It will you will lose credibility very, very quickly if you start to personalize it. I know it must be so hard because somebody's attacking your methodology, but you know what? You're still going home at the end of the day, and you're still gonna kiss your spouse and kiss your children and watch whatever sports are on TV that night. So don't take it so personally with cross-examination.
Agreed.
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
Yep.
To withstand that kind of cross-examination. Well, I want to thank our judges. As always, brilliant presentation, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, judges. As we transition to the next one, we just got the polling question number 3 up. Make sure that you're answering all of them if you want to get continuing ed credit. And we're going to be moving on to our next segment with we're going to bring Janae Castell back on, I think. Yep.
It's me again.
We're working you today.
Can't get rid of me. It's like
and Janae is going to spend some time talking with Craig Everett. You are going from AI to cost of capital. I mean, you're running the gamut today. So
yeah.
I'll let you take it away and introduce Craig Everett and everything. And thank you again.
Great. Absolutely. Thanks, Mel. And thanks for being with us, Craig. I'm looking forward to hearing you discuss some of what's going on with the cost of capital study. And I just want to give a little bit of background on you since you've been at the helm of this study for a number of years now. And you're an assistant professor of finance at Pepperdine University at their Graziadio business school.
Grazie Dio.
Grazie Dio. Okay, yeah. Get the Italian. Got to get away from the Spanish or the Portuguese. Okay. Fabulous. But you have a background in not only management consulting, but the aerospace and defense industry. And you're involved with Junior Achievement, which I love, the financial literacy courses and the work that Junior Achievement is doing with our youth on financial literacy. And you're also an author. So you've got a series, Toby Gold in this The Secret Fortune, which is very cool. Very cool. So you've got a lot of different kinds of experience coming into this. I wanted to ask you just to jump right in, unless you want anybody to know anything extra special, any other little tidbits, fun facts about Craig Everett?
There's nothing extra special, so go ahead.
I doubt that. But are you still taking responses to the survey?
No, the 2025 survey is closed as of the end of March. So
okay.
right now, just working on compiling the report.
Compiling, which is, I'm sure, a substantial amount of work. And do you have any expectations as you're getting these surveys in now? Do you have expectations of what you might see in the data or as a result of the surveys?
A little bit. Again, we're kind of early in the process and such, but we're seeing expected returns, which maybe I should take a step back.
Absolutely.
So the whole point of the private capital markets project and the survey is to get at cost of capital for private businesses, which for all of us that do anything in valuation, that's a big deal, because there's a couple approaches that we generally use to get at that, like particularly cost of equity, build up method or CAPM or something like that, and certainly not denigrating any of those, but what we want to do with this, and John Pagley at the beginning, at the founding of this back in 2009, was to kind of take a different angle at that question, because CAPM is based on data, historical data from public markets. Build-up method, does discounts and premia based again on like public data. So we wanted to get at this, not going from transaction data, but rather philosophically a private business's or any business's cost of capital has to be by definition equal to, over time and on average, the expected returns of the investors. Because if there's a discrepancy between those two, between expected returns and actual returns, then investors will move their money around. So over time, investment in any sort of business or any sort of investment at all is an opportunity cost. Investors have an infinite number of possibilities that they can invest in, and so they have to choose. So anytime they're choosing one investment, it's at the expense of another investment.
Yeah.
So that's why expected returns, on a theoretical basis anyway, is equal to your cost of capital. Your cost of capital is equal to the expected returns of the investors. So how did we address that? We said, well, if we want to go after that as an alternative way to determine cost of capital, how do we understand, how do we get to the expected returns of the investors? Well, we decided to ask them. And so that's what the private capital market survey is primarily about, is asking private equity investors, venture capital investors, debt investors, limited partners, what have you, what their expected returns are for various types of deals. And of course, there's going to be some fuzziness in there. There's going to be some noise, but we figure when we get at the medians and such, the outliers will be excluded, and we'll get at something that makes sense. Now, it's not meant to replace build-up method or CAPM or anything like that, but as an alternative that kind of goes directly to the investor's expectations rather than trying to figure it out via transactions. So our data is not transaction data, it's survey data. So therefore, it has all the limitations of survey data. It is noisy, but we think that, on average and over time, we get at the expectations of the investors.
I appreciate you giving us that summary, because I kind of jumped in assuming everybody knows about Pepperdine. I did drop in a link in the chat to where all of the historical surveys are stored and available for download. Now, 2025 won't be out yet. I know for those of you that are very familiar with Pepperdine, if you are a business appraiser that does fill out those surveys, you get access to the report. And is it still a little bit early access over?
Yeah. So yeah, the people who actually participate in the survey are the first to get the report.
Right. So that will be available upcoming. I think it usually is available in May. Is that a good expectation?
Yeah, it's usually available by the end of April.
Okay.
This year, I don't have my research assistant that helps me with this, and so it's probably going to take a little longer because it's basically all me this year.
Okay. Okay. Very, very interesting. Well, I do want to ask you. You highlighted this as either not necessarily an alternative, but as a comparison or a sanity check, something else to look at when you're maybe looking at CAPM or looking at Kroll data inputs, things like that. I wanted to ask you. I know this has been discussed previously in some other presentations that either you or John had done, but how different are the results mathematically when a practitioner uses the Kroll data or the transactional data, as you called it, and when a practitioner uses the Pepperdine Capital Markets project data, the survey data?
Yeah, good question. So mathematically, there's no relationship between them because the Kroll would be based on transactions, which is excellent, and such, and ours is based on feelings and what people's expectations and that sort of thing. So you'd expect them to be a little bit different, but they're not going to be consistently one year, every year one is going to be a little bit higher than the other. They should be in the same ballpark, but it could be a little higher, a little lower in a year, because again, it's based on survey response and investor expectations.
Have you found it to be, extremely, extremely different, or has it kind of been in that realm of what you would expect those differences to be? Are you going to get, a 35% cost of capital in the Pepperdine's survey where you get a 20%, cost of equity and using, the transactional accrual data?
Yeah, again, it's generally not, they're not very different,
Wildly,
but
yeah.
yeah, they will be. I would never expect them to be exactly the same. That would actually surprise me, just because expectations and actual results generally never line up anyway, and so so you'd expect them to be a little bit different.
Sure, that makes sense. Going back to, your expectations, and you talked about some of the limitations of survey data, and we know that the public data that we have, that is observable hard data, but it's not always perfect either, in the sense of applying it to, our subject companies. But I'm interested to know, is there any kind of confirmation bias? Is there any way that, your expectations for the results of the survey would bleed into the data or bleed into the report? Or how do you insulate the report to make sure that you're, if you're trimming data or not trimming data, or analyzing the data a certain way, or presenting the data a certain way, how might you insulate the report from any, bias or preconceived notions or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really do any sort of amendments or change to the data. This is based on survey data, and we just report it as it comes in. So, sometimes we'll get questions like, I disagree with this number. It's like, sorry, that's what people told us, and so that's what we report. So I can't see that my bias or any my research assistant's biases would enter into it, because we're just reporting what is being told us.
There's no isolation. Oh, I think that was, someone, I can't think, going through the survey, I can't think of exactly how this would look. But, if someone entered in a risk-free rate of 35%, they use a 35% risk-free rate. There's no, tossing out that data point as, oh, that was clearly an error and they meant to put 3.5, anything like that. It is what it is. Here's how it's submitted, and then we use it.
We generally, that's why we use medians for the most part instead of averages, because with the idea that, if somebody's makes a mistake or is lying or something like that, generally you can exclude those kind of outliers simply by using medians.
Have you had a lot of growth and participation, or how has the participation been, maybe over the years, or just if you want to talk about recently, in getting those surveys? How's that been going?
Yeah, it's been pretty stable the last few years. Now, at the very beginning, when it first launched, there was higher participation, and because it was new and exciting and such. And now that it's old and boring, it's there's a little bit less, but it's pretty stable. And we do activities every year to reach out and add new people to the panelists, and because people will retire and such. And so we're always reaching out for more participation, because obviously the bigger the sample sizes, the better.
Okay. Do you have thresholds for, if you don't get enough participation in certain segments or certain types of respondents? Do you use the few that you get, or do you have kind of a cutoff or a threshold, or you won't use it if you don't get under a certain number?
Yeah, and it depends from question to question based on the historical number of responses and such. But yeah, you'll see in the report, in a lot of the tables, you'll see just instead of a number, like a dash, or sometimes it's an NA or something, and that generally means that we didn't have enough responses to be significant in that area. So yeah, we are cognizant of sample sizes, and if we don't have enough, then we don't report anything.
Do you have any plans? There was a question on, industry specific information. You have any plans or ideas or different ways that you might expand the report or
I mean, yeah, potentially we right now there are no specific plans, but we get suggestions every year and decide. We try to keep it fairly consistent from year to year so people can compare year to year. There's some things that we do break out by industry, like the private equity questions, for example, are ones that we do break out by industry. But again, that the sample sizes, so generally we'll have about 60 or so private equity professionals. It can go as high as 100, whatever, responding. But when we start breaking it down by industry, those samples within that particular granular slicing and dicing can get pretty small. So where we can, we report by industry, and we do that. We indeed do that in the private equity section. We try to break out by industry, but my recommendation would probably be it's most reliable to use the overall numbers and then use just an industry adjustment like you would in a build-up method and such. And so take our basic cost of equity for that deal size. We do break out by deal size, and then do your own industry adjustment based on regularly published industry adjustments and such.
Okay. Anything you started, when was that? Was that about 5 years ago? Did you pick up about 5 years ago with?
It was like 10.
Was it 10? Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, man, time. Okay. So you've been involved, and were you involved before that?
I was involved for a couple of years before that, and then with John Paglia, and then he got made an associate dean, and so he dumped it all on me.
Yeah. I think I do. Yeah. So in the dozen or so years that you've been involved with this, have you been surprised by anything in the survey, or what have you learned over your tenure at or with the private capital markets report?
I don't think there have been any huge surprises. I mean, like a data point this year, I thought, okay, this is a little bit. So, like say for cost of equity. So from our private equity survey respondents, like last year in the $10 million deal size, is like 20.5% was our median expected return, which private equity expected returns have been decreasing over the years. I think they started out when private equity was super new and hot and such. The expected returns were higher, and they've come down, I think, based on actual returns being much lower than expected returns. And they've actually ticked up this year. So this year it's looking like it's, for that $10 million deal size, like around 23%. So it's bumped up from 20.5 to 23%. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I'm not sure if that's because that could be driven by a few things. Could be driven by inflation expectations or what have you, because those will tend up to drive up expected returns, because these are all nominal returns and such. And also, I should note that that number is for control positions. So we ask the question for buyout transactions as well as non-buyout. So you don't necessarily have to do a discount for lack of control, because we actually ask both questions. So we have built-in results for both control and non-control transactions. And so so anyway, it's like, oh, that's every year there's always some things in there where I'm interested, like, oh, expected returns look like they've gone up, which means that deal multiples probably have come down a little bit. That generally is the case. Again, the deal multiples, we ask questions about deal multiples, but our main focus is on cost of capital. So it's always interesting. You expect deal multiples and cost of capital to move against each other. But so we would expect, and it looks that way. It looks like deal multiples are slightly down from last year, and expected returns are slightly up.
Okay. Well, it's good when the data works like you expect it to.
Yeah, if they both moved in the same direction, I'd be really worried.
Like, yeah, what's going on? Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the PE multiples too, because it leads into if practitioners are wanting to look at this data and potentially utilize this data, how should they do so? What should they look at? What do the PE multiples mean, or what does the rate of return that they're seeing in some of the pieces of the survey? How should they use it? What should they rely on? What should they know?
Yeah, again, as indicated before, so table 1 in our report is a summary of essentially all the from the various types of capital providers and various deal sizes and like in VC in various stages, what the expected returns are, and those are intended directly to just plug in as cost of capital in a valuation model. And so table 1, which is right at the front of the report, is really, if there's one thing in the report that is used most often, it's table 1, because that gives you just in one shot all the various costs of capital, cost of debt, cost of equity, and such for various deals and various deal sizes. So people use that, and again, that's intended as a gut check against like CAPM or build-up model or whatever other way you're approaching your cost, calculating your cost of capital. It's like, okay, this is what expectations are by the providers. This should be somewhere in the ballpark of what I'm calculating in CAPM or build-up method.
Well, I know the reports are significantly more than just that one table.
Yeah, it's like
100 pages.
it's like 120 pages. So yeah, there is significantly more, and we ask a lot of questions, about just trends in the area. We survey, valuation professionals themselves. All types of capital. Again, limited partners. We even survey private businesses about what what they've seen in the market as far as acquiring capital and investment for their projects or their deals. And so yeah, we do ask a lot more questions. So there's a lot of interesting trends and analysis and such, but yeah, the core and the reason why we started doing this was for cost of capital reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I think there's so much to be learned here. I remember the old Ibbotson books, and everybody would just go to that back cover. I don't know if you're familiar with the Ibbotson. We'd just go to the back cover, but there was so much depth and analysis in the pages of the cost of capital book that was an incredible insight, and it was a great tool to use in your reports and just understanding what you're looking at. I like that you have there's a lot available for practitioners to kind of dig in and see, not just we've got the historical data, and that is useful. It has a good purpose. It tends to be fairly stable. But this is also interesting too, to have in mind, as you say, what are the expectations? What do people say their expectations are? And what, how do these line up and where do they move? And maybe if we can gain certain insights into this kind of company or this type of situation, or these types of market players, what are they thinking? What are they doing? Because I think it's always, we can get into statistical data and say, oh, well, this happened, and just go with it blindly. But if we don't really step back and think, okay, well, does this make sense? And does it really jive with the rest of the information that I have? What is it really saying? Can I really use this? Is it saying what I think it's saying? I think it's really important. So I'm really glad that we still have a lot of this to look at. And it wasn't always certain either. There was a time when I remember we weren't sure if the study was going to continue until you got funding for the study. So I think it's a great tool to have in valuation.
Oh,
And
we still need more funding because I would really like to get my research assistant back.
yeah, okay. Okay, so if anybody has connections on funding, send Craig a note. Yeah, and I do recommend, just it doesn't take much. Go look at that link that I sent. You can go look at the historical surveys that are out there. It is also interesting to go through and fill out the survey and just see, okay, here's different pieces, and you start putting in things, and you start thinking, well, gosh, I wonder what other people. I don't know. It's an interesting exercise to go through. So, I recommend if you haven't done so, to maybe see if you can get yourself signed up. Is there a way to get onto that listserv to be reminded about the survey if you haven't filled out the survey before?
Yeah, so if you go to privatecap.org or privatecap.org/reports, so private CAP, privatecap.org/reports, and then basically it asks you the question before you get sent to the archive on which whether you're a VC, whether you're a valuation professional, or whether you're private equity or whatever, and ask you if you'd like to be a panelist. And so so if you go through that link, privatecap.org/reports, which I will just put in here, privatecap.org/reports. I think I may have sent that to just one person. Anyway, if you go there, there we go. And sign up, and that'll take you to the archive. It'll also allow you to sign up to be a panelist.
Right. Yeah. And they'll send those reminders out, when it comes time, when it's open. So I appreciate you coming and discussing this with us. I'm sure you're really busy putting all the data together to send out the report. So I appreciate you taking a bit of time and just kind of discussing what's going on with the survey and maybe how we can be using it.
I'm glad to, Janae. It's been a pleasure.
Right. Likewise. All right. Well, that's it for me this time, guys. So back to you, Mel, Alina.
To me, Janae, but
Okay.
first, I think we are going to have Shanda, right?
Yeah, just wanted to do a couple announcements about some upcoming courses and events. Give me one moment and I'll share my screen. All right. So last week you mentioned it was Ninesh and Nick about the AI for Valuation and Forensics Primer, which is happening on April 30th. It is a free webinar from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. So you will get 1 hour CP credit for that. So if you join us, so yeah, just go. The links are in the materials, but you can also just go to nacb.com/AIBVF to register for that event. And then we just have some upcoming ABW in-depth webinar sessions starting on May 19th, 2025 will be the Lawyer's Business Valuation Handbook 3rd edition. And on June 23rd, if you want to practice business valuation, you have to peel the onion. And those are upcoming. So, and there's more information there in the link, nacb.com/ABW or /ABW in-depth. All right, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Alina.
Thank you, Shanda. And now we have a session where we discuss cases, and we have this session every 3 months. And when I saw the name of the case that we were discussing today, it was very interesting to me. So I went through the materials like, are we actually talking about this case? Because some cases we may think, oh, these are boring and important. But this one is very well known. If you have seen Hulu shows, ABCs, and all these shows about this lady, it's super interesting. But for me, it's more interesting knowing that for some of us, business valuations and projections, especially projections, oh, we are doing this and it's okay, we're doing the valuation, but how impacted so many people as a result of that. And especially people that at the end, yes, it impacted life because there were even suicides as a result of this particular case. So, Michael, glad to have you here discussing this case today.
You, Alina. Okay, that's me. That shows up every week. So the case this week, this episode, I guess, is a little further or out of my norm. It's a criminal case involving it's U.S. versus Holmes. Is a criminal prosecution for investment fraud and So you all heard about the case. This is the okay, whatever. So Elizabeth Holmes promoted her company and a fraudulent Theranos, that's it. A fraudulent method of detecting or doing lab testing. And this particular case is an appeal of the conviction of the two principal actors at Theranos. And the court, there were two different issues on appeal. The one that I'm going to discuss has to do with measuring loss under the Mandatory Victim Restitution Act, or MVRA, which is the acronym that shows up throughout the case. The court also dealt with a challenge to the trial court's allowance of testimony by Theranos employees as fact witnesses, and the defendants were challenging the fact that they were admitted as fact witnesses rather than being qualified as expert witnesses, because all of the testimony related to the things that they were working on day to day, which were scientific in nature, and it dealt with what the tests were and how the samples were gathered and all this other stuff, highly technical stuff. And they insisted that these people should have been qualified as experts, but the trial court did not. Ultimately, on that issue, the appellate court said, you're right, they should have been qualified as experts, but there was so much other evidence that that error was harmless. So that's enough on that. Factual background on the case: in 2003, Ms. Holmes founded Theranos. She served as its CEO from 2004 to 2016. In 2009, she brought on her romantic partner, Ranesh Balwani. Eventually, he was appointed as president and chief operating officer. The opinion doesn't specify when that exactly happened, but doesn't really matter from perspective of the case. They claim to have developed a revolutionary technology that allowed lab tests to be done from a drop of blood as opposed to vials of blood, which is the current practice. Healthcare and investment worlds were just nuts over this. And in 2010, Theranos went into a partnership with Walgreens to offer its testing services at its retail pharmacies, which would have given it national scope almost instantly. And then that announcement about Walgreens was a vehicle for Theranos to sell a bunch of stock to a half dozen investors. Theranos was never managed to get to an IPO. So this case involves the losses related to those 6 investors, primarily. Comes in the pharmacies that also invested in delivering these services or offering these services was another victim of the fraud. So as it turns out, their magic method was a complete hoax. They had nothing. In 2015, CMS came in, did a surprise inspection, and decided that the deficiencies in their clinical lab practices and procedures put patient health in immediate jeopardy and shut them down. As the scrutiny continued, the whole thing unraveled that they really had nothing behind any of this. It was all smoke and mirrors. And then ultimately the company shut down in September of 2018. So in June of 2018, the two defendants, Holmes and Balwani, were indicted on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. They had separate trials. Both defendants were convicted. Ultimately, Balwani was sentenced to 155 months in prison and 3 years of probation after that. Holmes was only sentenced to 135 months of prison. Had to do with one particular count related to representations that Balswani was making, I believe, to the pharmacy victims, that involve things that Holmes had not said. And that was the differential in sentencing. She was also sentenced to probation after the jail term or prison term. And then, important for us, the trial court ordered defendants jointly and severally to pay restitution under the MVRA of $397 million to the investor victims and another roughly $55 million to Safeway and Walgreens, who were the two pharmacies that they brought in to be the vehicle for providing this testing service to the public. So those are the facts that we're dealing with. The appellate standard is something that really comes into play here. So generally speaking, the legality of a restitution order and the trial court's valuation methodology is subject to de novo review, which means that the appellate court sits back and puts themselves, the panel, puts themselves in the shoes of the trial court in making decisions about how that restitution is framed and calculated. Once that the trial court's decision meets the hurdle of being a proper application of the legal principle, then the appellate court shifts its focus to an abuse of discretion standard to look at the actual factual determination made by the trial court. And that review is only for clear error. So for a lot of us, we deal with damage calculations where you have the issue of fact of damages is a legal question. The amount of damages is a fact question. So at an appellate level, the appellate review would be de novo on the fact of damages, whether or not the plaintiff suffered an injury, and then the ruling on, excuse me, the ruling on the amount of damages becomes one for clear error. So that gives you the same perspective in this criminal context. Okay, so the MVRA says that an offense resulting in damage to or loss or destruction of property of a victim of the offense, the offender must return the property to the owner, or if return is impossible, impractical, or inadequate, the offender has to pay the victim an amount equal to the value of the property less any value as of the date the property is returned of any part of the property that is actually returned. A lot of gobbledygook, but again, focus is value of the property when taken less any value that is applicable to it when returned. So the trial court, or at the trial level, what this appeal was about was that the trial court set restitution at the full amount of the shareholder investment, less, and there was separate civil litigation, and there was some recovery under insurance policies that offset the restitution amount. And the defendant said, looking at Dura Pharmaceuticals, the investors didn't sustain any economic loss. Dura Pharmaceuticals is a civil securities fraud case. It's a class action case involving a publicly traded company. And in Dura Pharmaceuticals, the court held that it is not just the fact that the price was inflated at the time of purchase, because at the time of purchase, the investor receives a share of stock that is valued at a particular price within the market. They could turn around and sell that share right after purchasing it and receive the same value back. So it is not that the triggering event is not the date of purchase. And that was the claim that the defendants were making, is that because the investors received stock in Theranos, they had not actually sustained any loss to property. The appeals court determined that Dora Pharmaceuticals is inappropriate for determining property loss under the MVRA. The MVRA focuses on property loss rather than economic loss. So Dora Pharmaceuticals is talking about whether or not the transaction resulted in economic harm, whereas the MVRA is focusing on whether or not there has been a loss of property. So they looked, the appeals court instead looked to Roberts versus United States, which is a criminal case. And in that case, the Supreme Court found that the bank's property loss was the amount, the total amount loaned to the defendants, not the economic harm that the bank sustained when it sold the houses later in a foreclosure sale for less than the balance due. So the appeals court also faulted, and again, we're getting into the issue of technical error versus whether or not it's reversible error. So the appeals court did fault the trial court for failing to consider the residual value of the shares as a credit to the property loss. Because going back to the language of the MVRA, the restitution order is the amount taken less any amount returned. And so to the extent there was residual value of the shares, which the trial court didn't consider in creating its order, that should have been offset against the purchase price. That said, the error was considered harmless because this company was a complete sham. It had no operation other than the fraud it was perpetrating about this magic testing process. And so once that was shown to be fraudulent, the entire company collapsed and there was no residual value involved. So summing up, the MVRA focuses on, for those of you who get involved in criminal cases, the MVRA focuses on property loss, not economic harm, as defined under this civil securities fraud claim. And here, as frequently happens in criminal fraud investment cases, so Ponzi schemes, straight up criminal securities fraud, the taking of the property in exchange for stock that has no value but for the fraud does not allow for an offset of restitution. And as always, if you're interested in the cases, this particular case is available on Key Value Data's federal and state law database, or you can shoot me an email. I will send you the case. I also have Dora Pharmaceuticals and the Robert case, if you're interested in them. And other than that, I will go back. I think I'm handing this back off to Mel.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Thank you, Michael. It's an interesting case. There's some specials on it. I mean, that whole thing was just crazy. So, all right, we're coming into our final segment. We've got our final, no, not our final. We've got our fifth polling question up for you. And we're going to bring back Michael Gregory for the final segment with Karen Lascelle. And I hope I pronounced it correctly. Going to be talking about the learning from mistakes, which I think we all do. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like I think about my engagement letter, and there's things in that engagement letter that are just solely a result of my mistakes. So, but I think is Michael coming back onto? Yeah,
Yes,
he's starting to share a screen. So he's gonna have a conversation with you. I'll let him introduce you. Y'all know Michael. Mike, it's great to have you back. We've bookended you at the beginning, at the end here. So Well, I can see your screen now, Mike. There you go.
All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure to be here. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you a friend of mine and someone who is an outstanding valuer. And I'm going to just share a little background. You have some information there on the sheet in front of you, but Karen has her MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. She was in the inaugural list of 40 under 40 honorees in 2014 with NACFA. She was in the inaugural list of Forbes 2024 America's 200 top CPAs. She has served on the Valuation Credentialing Board with NACFA. She served twice on the Ethics and Oversight Board. It was my pleasure to serve on that with her. She's on the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Commission for NACFA. She's currently up for an election here for the Executive Advanced Board. She's the past president of our New Hampshire Society of CPAs. She's a CPA. She's been a CPA since 1999. She's been a CVA since 2011 and a CFE since 2017. And I happened to sit in her presentation last year, December 13th, with the NACFA conference on the importance of engagement, foundation, learning from my mistakes. And I was totally impressed with what she had to say. She operates by integrity. She's honest. She's forthright. She's professional. And she's offering advice to us based on what she's done. She was totally vulnerable with this. And it's from that sense that I've given some background about Karen. But Karen, is there anything else you want to tell about yourself that you want to share?
I love it. Thank you, Mike. I think just as you said, I don't mind being vulnerable. I think it's important in our profession. And I really find it important to give back to the community and give back to our profession as a whole. So I'm very grateful to be here today, Mike. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and now you're a CPA, you're also a business valuer.
Yes.
And you enjoy doing business valuations. We talked about this. But why do you do what you do? Why do you enjoy doing this?
Honestly, I absolutely love helping people. I started out in tax and got a little glimpse of valuation in the beginning in public accounting. I've been in public accounting my whole career. And I just found that valuation really got you to a whole nother level with clients and getting to know their businesses. And it just brought so much joy and enthusiasm to the work that I do. I just absolutely love it. I like to get to know the clients better. I like to get to know their businesses on a strategic level. I love training people. So it's really fit in well with the work that I've done over the years.
Well, in terms of, you had a 1 hour presentation or 50-minute presentation, and you shared a lot of stories with us. What do you want to share with us today?
Oh gosh, there's so much I could share. And I'm sure for anyone that knows me knows I could talk a lot. Don't be afraid to admit your mistakes. And that's one of the key ones here, right? Everyone makes mistakes. I don't care who you are, you make mistakes. You need to learn from them. You need to grow from them. If someone's telling you they don't make mistakes, steer clear. You want to work with people that are honest and people that are ethical. I love what the judges said earlier. Judge Yates said he is smart enough to know he doesn't know everything. Here, same. Judge Driscoll said, don't be afraid to be a human being. I think that's so important in the work that we do. My valuation practice is focused mainly on litigation work, mostly marital dissolutions. I do tax, gift, and estate work, and then merger and acquisition work. And bringing that human element to the work is vital. And especially, as I said, in telling your story and getting across to the trier of fact, that's extremely important, but also just with the clients as well and making sure they understand. A lot of what I talked about in December too is just making time to be sure that you're setting up your engagements properly. That's really going to save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of mistakes down the road. Making sure, that you have everything in writing with the client and that you're getting all the details from the client right at the beginning is certainly pivotal. I had, there's a few examples I gave it in December. One of them, making sure that your jurisdictions are accurate, right? I work in the New England region, so all of our states are really close by. but all the states do not handle things such as divorce the same. So depending on the jurisdiction I'm in, and that's one of the examples I gave, I had started an engagement where my clients were located in New Hampshire, but the business was located in Massachusetts. So instantly valuing the business, thinking of the business, I had it in my head that I was valuing based on the standards in Massachusetts, when in fact, the divorce is in New Hampshire. The clients lived in New Hampshire. Now, luckily, that's one of those, it's a mistake that I caught early on. It wasn't catastrophic by any means. I didn't get into court and have to say why I did fair market value versus fair value, but that's an egg on your face that you don't want or need. So making sure that you set up those engagements properly from the beginning. And my suggestion and our standards suggested as well, getting things in writing if you can, because you always have something to fall back on. It's another example. You know, typically I charge a flat fee for the business valuation itself, and then I charge an hourly fee for anything beyond that, like work on interrogatories, depositions, mediation, expert witness testimony, things like that. Or if I'm in an M&A engagement, then I'm helping with due diligence. That is all hourly rates. So I had a client just this past year that came back and said, hey, what is this invoice? I thought the flat fee was X. And I said, it certainly was. And then after the valuation was done, we did all this work on interrogatories and so forth and so on, preparation for trial, and, you know, listed out the work I did, and then snipped the part of the engagement letter that says, you know, the flat fee for the valuation and the hourly rate for all the other work. And, you know, the client was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm sure I read that. And I certainly signed the engagement letter. So having everything in place, but having the proper communication as well, because does some of that fall back on me? Probably, because perhaps I wasn't as clear with the client when I set up the engagement to begin with. So always something that you can learn from and that you can grow from. So those are, you know, just a couple examples. I could provide examples all day long. And like I said, I don't mind doing that. I don't mind being vulnerable. I don't mind saying, learn from the mistakes I made. You know, I have an engagement right now where it's a divorce again, and the couple lives in Maine and the business is in New Hampshire. And again, the standards of value are different. And in this case, actually, it's not the standards of value that particularly matter. In this case, what's happening is in New Hampshire, in a divorce, the typically anything that is property within the household, let's say, is subject to the marital estate. Whereas in Maine, if it is inherited property, the value is just the increase in value since it was inherited while they were in the marriage. So I'm doing a valuation now where we're looking at the value at one date when it was inherited, and the value, the appreciated value or depreciated for the marital estate purposes. Whereas in New Hampshire, we would have been just looking at one value at one specific date and time. So understanding these things, making sure that you're understanding the scope of the engagement before you even take it on. You know, there's a very different cost to providing two values than there is to providing one. And just that really can help set you up for success as you go forward.
And Karen, let me just interject on that second example you have that you gave, where the client had an additional upfront fee for the valuation, and then for your extra work, you were charging on an hourly basis. It strikes me that one of the lessons learned there is oftentimes the folks, when they're signing the engagement letter or when you're talking to them, this is a very stressful situation for them. And oftentimes they're not necessarily listening all that well. They're accepting that you are speaking, they're accepting that you're saying something, they're nodding their head that, okay, I'm okay with this, but they don't necessarily know that. And so that kind of begs the question of, that probably needs to be reiterated with them, so that they understand, now this is the fee for the report, once you give them the report, and to tell them again, now for all the other things going forward, we're going to do this at an hourly fee. So is that, for example, one of the lessons that you learned from that in the future, knowing that it's a stressful situation like this, yes, we've signed the agreement, but I probably need to reinforce that with them when I give them the report. And I can do that just verbally when I give it to them. because that will help avoid that level of stress when that bill comes in. Is that something that you learned from this, or are there other lessons that you learned?
Yes, absolutely. No, that's the main takeaway that I learned from that one. And again, it gets back to that communication, right? Making sure to stay up on that communication with that client. Absolutely.
Okay. Do you want to share another example with us?
Yeah, well, and just some things I want to talk about, some things that NACBA members especially can kind of walk away from today, and some recommendations I have. One, just I would suggest yearly. I do it yearly, pick a time that works for you, but take time to review the standards for any organization that you belong to, right? If you're credentialed, you have to follow the standards of all the organizations that you're credentialed with. Take the time to go back and read those standards and make sure that you are following them properly, because perhaps there's something you have strayed from or that you're not remembering or in the standards. Review Revenue Ruling 5960. We don't say that it's one of the most important pieces of literature, valuation literature, for no reason. Read some other major literature that pertains to the engagements that you're particularly working on. Set up the engagements properly from the start. Like I said, have some checklists, have some templates so you're not forgetting something when you're in the moment of talking with a client. And then kind of the last key takeaway I want people to think about, and I can provide some resources for you in the chat as well, but reach out to mentors, reach out to people at the association. The NACBA has a formal mentor program if that's something that you are in need of. Colleagues that we meet, going to the conferences, attending things like this, I know that I can call you up, Mike, and ask you a question if I have a question. And then there's a whole bunch of NACBA resources that are there to help you. As you said, I sit on the Ethics Oversight Board currently, and on our website, or on the NACFA website, there's a standards and ethics question submittal form. So you can actually submit a question and get an answer back if you have questions of what's going on. There's a standards and ethics frequently asked questions library that's on the website, and I can post these. There's the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Commission that I sit on. They have just published an advisory brief on the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that brief can be found on the website as well. I just posted them right now in the chat. We have a webinar coming up, AI for Valuation and Forensics, an NACBA primer. That's a free webinar coming up that you can attend to get more information and make sure you're staying up with standards and things that are happening in the industry. So just a whole lot of making sure that you're staying up with your standards, you're staying up with your research, you're staying current, and then you're reaching out to others so that you can learn from them.
I see our next poll question has come up. I just need to click on that. And then I can get my screen back. Another thought, and you and I spoke about this, and I appreciate what you just said on Revenue Ruling 5960 and standards. And maybe if you within your firm have a policy that you have some periods when you're not as busy, and that would be a good time to just remind folks, just take some time to go ahead and take a look at that to refresh ourselves. But when you do screw up, and we all do, and we all make mistakes, how do you recover with grace after you've made a mistake?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is owning your mistake, right? Because, egg on your face, and people can tell if you're trying to cover a mistake. It's a bad look. It doesn't go over well. But owning your mistake, being honest with either the client or whoever it is, or God forbid, if you're on the stand and there's a mistake in your report, own that mistake, and then discuss the effects of how that might change whatever it is that you're working on, and move forward from there. You have to be able to brush things off. You have to be able, the judges talked about this too, about not taking everything so personally, and that can be hard for a lot of people to do. It's super hard for me to do, but I can't take everything personally. I have to do my job. I know I'm a professional. I know I'm smart enough to do my job, so to be able to own up to your mistakes, recover from them, learn from them so that you're not repeating them is super important.
Well, with our last minute or two, are there any other recommendations or thoughts that you want to share that we haven't already covered?
Just just reaching out. I can't stress enough reaching out, getting involved in the association, getting involved in whichever organizations you belong to, and really seeking that outside advice, because you only know what you know, and you what you don't know, right? So make sure that you're getting that advice from other people. Make sure that you're constantly learning, constantly staying up on things. I think the artificial intelligence things we've talked about today, the cases that we've talked about today, those are always developing, they're always emerging. And even if you're not staying relevant, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, to your clients, and to our industry as a whole, honestly.
Yeah, and as we discussed, we both have mentors and folks who reach out to, and NACFA is kind enough to put together an AI training sessions, series of them, starting here on April 30th. I certainly will be attending that. I appreciate that the society is offering that to us. And with that, I just want to say, Karen, thank you very much for being with us today. It's always a pleasure. Great to see you again. And I'll pass this back on over to Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Karen. Great session. And that's it. That's a wrap for us for this month's program for AVW. Next month, we will be live again, May 19th, same time, here with another great program that we've got planned for you. So I hope that you have an incredible rest of the month, recovering from tax season if you're in that game. And we'll see you on May 19th. Thanks, Alina.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.